Welcome to another deep dive, and this time we're looking at something that I think is on a lot of people's minds,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the shift from physical education to health and physical education,
Right.
especially with the rollout of this new Australian curriculum HPE framework.
Yeah.
So, like, imagine you're a PE teacher who just loves getting kids active, running around,
Yeah.
and suddenly you're also expected to cover health education.
Yeah.
Like, whoa!
It's a big
It's
ask.
a whole new world.
Yeah, it is. And, understandably, I think some teachers might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by that.
For sure.
But what's really interesting is that this isn't the first time that Australian schools have gone through this kind of transition.
Yeah.
We've actually got some research from 2015
Okay.
that looked at a really similar shift that happened about 20 years earlier. And it offers some really valuable lessons, I think, for what's happening today.
Okay, so we're time traveling back to 1999.
We're going back to 1999.
What happened then?
Well, back then, in 99, Queensland introduced a new HPE syllabus,
Okay.
which was kind of a precursor
Right.
to the framework we have now.
Okay.
And this research, which was published in a journal called Sport Education and Society,
Okay.
really delves into how schools adapted to that change.
Okay.
And specifically, they looked at 3 Brisbane Catholic education primary schools,
Okay.
all different sizes.
So we got like a small, medium, and large.
That's a good mix to see how different contexts kind of played out.
Exactly. Yeah, cool. So what stood out to you from their experiences?
Well, the researchers did a really thorough job.
Okay.
They used interviews, they did observations, they even looked at school documents to get a really complete picture.
Right.
And one of the biggest takeaways for me
Yeah.
is that regardless of the school size,
Okay.
strong leadership
Right.
and open communication
Yeah.
were absolutely essential for actually successfully implementing HPE.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
You need someone to like champion the change and make sure that everyone's on the same page.
totally.
But I imagine that's easier said than done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Especially when you've got teachers who are already feeling stretched thin.
You're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head there. Time constraints were a massive concern back then,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they still are today.
Oh, yeah.
But what's really cool is that these key studies also show that with some, creative thinking and strategic planning,
Okay.
schools can actually find ways to make HPE a priority.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into those case studies then.
Let's do it.
What did they learn from that small school?
Well, the small school actually didn't have a dedicated HPE specialist.
Right.
Which meant that teachers were kind of left to their own devices to
Uh-huh.
figure out how to cover the curriculum.
I see.
And that actually led to quite a bit of inconsistency
Oh, really?
in how HPE was actually being implemented.
So it was kind of like a free-for-all?
Yeah, kind of.
I can see how that would be problematic,
Yeah.
especially if some teachers feel more confident than others
Yeah.
in teaching those health topics.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about health either.
Okay.
They also didn't have a formal perceptual motor program,
Uh-huh.
which is so important for those young kids, to develop those fundamental movement skills
Yeah,
that they really need early on.
absolutely.
So it just shows how important it is to have some kind of structured approach,
Right.
even in a small setting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't
Yeah.
considered that. What about the medium-sized school?
Okay.
Did they have a dedicated HPE teacher?
They did. They did. They had a teacher named Rory.
Okay.
And Rory's story is actually a fantastic example
Okay.
of how one passionate HPE specialist can make a real difference.
Awesome.
He really championed the subject,
Mhm.
and he led the development of this really well-structured PE program,
Okay.
which made sure that they had consistency across the different grade levels.
So Rory was the go-to person for all things PE.
He was the PE guy.
Awesome. What about the health side of the curriculum, though?
That's where things get interesting.
Okay.
While Rory took the lead on the PE side of things,
Yeah.
the responsibility for actually teaching the health and personal development
Right.
fell mostly to the classroom teachers
Okay.
because they were the ones who knew their students best,
Right.
and they were already covering some of those topics in other areas.
So it's like they were dividing and conquering.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Did it work, though?
It definitely had its strengths.
Okay.
I mean, they had this really clear division of responsibilities
Right.
and a strong focus on collaboration.
Huh.
But there is a potential downside to this approach,
What's that?
and that is that HPE might have been viewed as separate subjects
Right.
rather than this integrated whole.
So the potential downside is that students might miss out on those connections
Yeah.
between the physical and the health aspects of well-being.
That's
Okay, that's something to be mindful of for sure. as you're thinking about your own approach to implementing this new framework?
Definitely.
How could you create that more holistic experience?
Hmm.
All right, let's move on to the large school then.
Okay.
They had a full-time HPE specialist, right?
They did.
I imagine their experience was totally different.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But their experience actually highlights how important clear communication is,
Yeah.
even when you have more resources.
Yeah.
Because at this large school,
Yeah.
there was actually quite a lot of confusion about who was responsible for teaching what,
Oh, really?
which led to some potential gaps in the delivery of the curriculum.
So even with a dedicated expert, things can slip through the cracks
Yeah,
if there isn't clear communication.
exactly.
What went wrong there?
Well, one of the teachers actually said this, and I quote,
Okay.
"We just assume that Naomi's getting through everything."
Oh, wow.
Naomi was their HPE specialist.
Right. So they just assumed that she was a superhero who could single-handedly cover the whole curriculum.
Pretty much.
Wow. So it's a good reminder that even with a specialist,
Yeah,
you still need that whole school approach.
100%.
And that kind of brings us to another key takeaway from this research.
Yeah.
And that is professional development is crucial
Yes.
for all teachers,
Everyone.
not just the HPE specialists.
Not just the specialists.
So everyone needs to be on the same page, understanding the curriculum
Yeah,
and how to implement it effectively.
exactly.
What kind of professional development do you think would be most helpful
Ooh, that's a good question.
for teachers facing this transition?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
And it's actually one that we are going to explore further
Oh.
when we look at some practical takeaways from this research.
Okay, great.
But before we get there, I'm actually really curious to hear your initial thoughts.
Okay.
What stood out to you so far from these case studies?
Okay.
And have you encountered similar situations in your own school?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure our listeners have too.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that right after the break.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how those schools navigated the change, you
Yeah.
know? And I'm sure some of those challenges really resonate with what people are facing today.
Yeah, definitely.
We were just talking about professional development,
Yeah.
and it makes me think about a question we got at a conference a while back.
Okay.
Back in 2013.
Right.
There was a primary PE teacher named Christina,
Uh-huh.
and she was feeling really lost about how to actually incorporate the health component into her lessons.
Yeah, Christina's question definitely wasn't unique. I remember at that conference talking to a lot of teachers
Yeah,
who had similar concerns.
yeah.
And it really highlighted this dilemma
Mm-hmm.
of, how do you fit HPE into an already packed schedule?
Yeah.
Some of them were only seeing their students for
Right.
one PE class a week.
It's like they're being asked to add a whole new subject without any extra time.
No wonder some teachers feel overwhelmed.
And especially if their training
Yeah.
didn't cover much health content,
Right.
it's a recipe for stress.
Totally. So how do we bridge that gap then?
Yeah.
Is ongoing professional development the key?
I think it's a crucial piece of the puzzle,
Okay.
but it can't just be like a one-off workshop.
Oh.
It needs to be continuous.
Oh, yeah.
It needs to be tailored to the actual needs of the teachers,
Right.
and it needs to be responsive
Yeah.
to the challenges they're facing in their classrooms.
I'm picturing like mentorship programs, peer-to-peer learning,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even bringing in experts to share best practices.
Yeah.
The more engaging and collaborative, the better.
Right,
No.
100%.
Yeah.
I think fostering that culture of professional learning
Yeah.
within schools is really vital.
For sure.
Because when teachers feel supported
Mm-hmm.
and when they feel empowered,
Yeah,
they're much more likely to embrace these kinds of curriculum changes.
that makes sense. Confident teachers lead to engaged students.
Ugh.
And that ultimately creates a healthier school community.
Yeah.
But even with the best training, I imagine time constraints are still a major hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
How can teachers realistically fit all this in
Yeah, it's a big one.
to their already busy schedules?
It is, and I think that's where the whole school approach becomes so important. It's not about treating HPE as this separate, isolated subject.
Right.
It's about finding ways to actually integrate it into other areas of the curriculum.
We saw some of that in the case studies, right?
Yeah, we did.
Some teachers were connecting HPE to religious education or science lessons.
Yeah,
I can see how those subjects have some natural overlaps.
totally. You could be talking about cooperation and respect in religious education,
Uh-huh.
and then link that to healthy relationships in HPE.
Right.
Or you could use a science lesson about the human body
Yeah.
as a springboard for discussions about nutrition and physical activity.
It's about making those connections explicit for the students,
Yeah.
showing them how HPE is relevant to their lives,
Mm-hmm.
Not just something they do for an hour a week.
Totally.
Plus, I bet that integrated approach could make planning a bit easier, too.
Absolutely. It frees up time for teachers to collaborate,
Yeah,
to share resources, maybe even to co-teach some lessons.
love it. And collaboration doesn't have to stop at the school gates either, does it?
It doesn't.
You thinking about partnerships?
Yeah, like those ones mentioned in the case studies, like bringing in organizations like Life Education or Jump Rope for Heart.
Yeah, they're great examples.
Yeah.
They can really supplement the curriculum
Yeah.
and expose students to all these different aspects of health
Mm-hmm.
in a fun and engaging way.
Yeah.
But partnerships can go even further than that.
Okay.
Think about connecting with local sports clubs,
Uh-huh.
health professionals, community groups.
It's about tapping into all those existing resources
Yeah,
to create a much more comprehensive HPE experience.
exactly.
So it's not just the school's responsibility.
It takes a village.
It really does take a village.
Yeah, to support students' health and well-being.
100%.
We've talked a lot about the how of implementing HPE effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I think it's important to revisit the why.
Okay.
Why is this shift from PE to HPE so important in the first place?
That is a great point.
It's easy to get caught up in the logistics
Yeah,
and lose sight of the bigger picture.
totally.
What does this research say about the underlying purpose of this shift?
Well, it really emphasizes this idea of social justice.
Okay.
Creating a more equitable and inclusive learning environment.
Right.
It means recognizing that all students have different needs and abilities when it comes to health and physical activity,
Right.
and that the HPE curriculum
Yeah.
needs to be flexible enough
Yeah.
to cater to that diversity.
So we can't just assume that everyone's starting from the same point
No.
or has the same access to resources.
Absolutely not. What about those social and cultural factors
Yeah.
that influence health outcomes?
Yeah. How does HPE address those?
Well, a truly holistic approach acknowledges those factors
Yeah.
and seeks to create a learning environment that's supportive and empowering for all students.
So we're talking about socioeconomic status, cultural background, even gender norms.
Yeah, all of that.
It's about going beyond those traditional PE lessons
Right.
and equipping students with the knowledge, the skills, and the critical thinking abilities they need
Yeah.
to navigate the complexities of health and well-being.
100%.
Wow.
The 1999 Queensland HPE syllabus actually talked about this.
Really?
It talked about promoting
Okay.
social justice principles of diversity, equity, and supportive environments.
Wow.
That emphasis on social justice
Yeah.
was a key driver behind the shift to a more holistic HPE curriculum
Back then.
back then,
And it's just as relevant today.
if not more so.
Absolutely. It's inspiring to see how HPE can be a tool for social change. But I'm also aware that some teachers might feel like they're not qualified to
Yeah,
tackle these bigger societal issues.
that's true. It can feel daunting.
Yeah.
But remember, HPE isn't about having all the answers.
Yeah.
It's about providing students with a safe and supportive space
yeah.
to explore these issues, to ask questions, and to develop their own critical thinking skills.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
We've covered so much in this deep dive into the shift from PE to HPE,
Yeah.
from those challenges of changing the curriculum to teacher training,
Yeah.
and that really powerful link between education and social justice. But before we go, I want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
We're talking about schools,
Right.
but how much of this do you think could apply to other places too?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's one that we should be talking about more.
Yeah.
We often think of health and well-being as just something for schools
Yeah.
or maybe the gym,
Right.
but all those things that affect student well-being,
Yeah.
like stress, workload relationships, access to resources, they're all in our workplaces too.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder if companies could benefit from a similar shift in thinking.
Yeah.
Instead of just offering the gym membership or the fruit basket,
Right.
what if they actually thought about employee well-being more broadly?
It's a really interesting thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Imagine if workplaces actually invested in professional development
Yeah.
to help their employees with things like mental health or stress management or healthy communication skills.
Right. Imagine if they actually created environments that really supported work-life balance.
Yeah.
And encourage that feeling of community.
Yeah, it's a whole different way of thinking about it, isn't it?
It is. It's not just ticking boxes.
Right.
It's really about building a culture
Yeah.
that values well-being.
Absolutely. And just like in schools,
Mm-hmm.
it would need everyone to be on board. You need leadership that's supportive
Uh-huh.
and clear communication,
Yeah.
and everyone has to be willing to try new things.
Right. But the potential benefits are huge.
Oh, yeah.
Like happier, healthier employees.
Mm-hmm.
They'd probably get more done
Yeah.
and maybe even take fewer sick days.
It seems like a win-win for everyone.
It does. And then there's that ripple effect.
Oh, yeah. What do you mean?
Like when people feel valued and supported at work,
Yeah.
they're more likely to bring those good habits and positive attitudes home with them,
Right.
and that affects their families and communities.
It's true.
So it's not just about individuals.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a healthier society for all of us.
It all starts with the places where we spend so much of our time.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
pretty powerful thought.
It is. Maybe someday we'll be doing deep dives into research on,
Yeah,
how does a company become a well-being champion or something?
I'd listen to that episode.
Me too.
So we've gone from those early curriculum changes in Australia
Mm.
to the need for good professional development
Yeah.
and how important that whole school and whole community approach is.
Yeah.
But I won't leave you with this one key takeaway.
Okay.
Real change,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in schools or workplaces or even just our own lives.
Yeah.
It starts with awareness and understanding.
I love that.
So by taking the time to think about these things,
Yeah.
to question what we think we know,
Mm-hmm.
and to learn from other people's experiences,
Yeah.
we can start to create a healthier and fairer world.
I couldn't agree more.
So as you go about your day,
Yeah.
think about what really stood out to you in this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do,
Yeah.
no matter how small,
Yeah.
to be a champion for health and well-being?
Great question.
Keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Keep challenging the way things are,
Mm.
and keep talking about it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time,
Mm.
keep diving deep.